The lights are down low. A turntable hums in the corner of an empty apartment. A record drops, and a voice fills the room. A voice that isn't the one you remember. Somewhere, a group is standing on a stage without the man or woman who made them famous. And the strangest part? The crowd is still screaming.
Whenever you want me, I'll be there.
Because sometimes, the story you think you know is only half the story. Sometimes the person everyone assumed was irreplaceable wasn't the reason the songs became legendary at all. Before you go any further, subscribe, because what's coming will change the way you hear 10 songs you already know by heart. At number 1, a group loses 2 of its founding members in a public humiliating fallout and comes back with the biggest hit of their entire career. The countdown begins now.
All that a woman should be and
Number 10, Atlantic Starr, Always. Picture a wedding reception in 1987. The lights dim, the DJ cues up 4 minutes of slow dance perfection, and a room full of strangers becomes, just for a moment, one heartbeat. That song was Always. And the voice carrying it wasn't the voice Atlantic Starr fans grew up on. For years, the group's sound belonged to Sharon Bryant, a singer with a bright, agile voice who fronted the band through the late 70s and into the early 80s. She was there for their early climb, part of the machine that built their foundation in the R&B underground before mainstream radio ever noticed them. Then, in 1983, she walked away to chase a solo career. Atlantic Starr didn't collapse. They didn't even slow down. Instead, guitarist and vocalist David Lewis stepped forward, and something unexpected happened. The group's sound got warmer, more intimate, more built for the kind of quiet storm radio format that was about to define an entire era of black love songs.
come with me, my sweet.
2 years after Bryant's departure, Secret Lovers became one of the biggest quiet storm records in the country. 2 years after that, Always didn't just chart, it became a wedding staple that still plays today. Decades after most people forgot Sharon Bryant was ever the voice of Atlantic Starr in the first place. Sharon Bryant left believing her voice was the group's identity. Instead, the label doubled down on David Lewis, and Atlantic Starr's biggest commercial success came from a version of the group built entirely around the person who was never supposed to be the star. Bryant's solo career, meanwhile, never came close to the heights she walked away from. And she wasn't the only founding voice history quietly erased. Because coming up, a group loses its lead singer not to ambition, but to death. And somehow, that's when the hits started coming.
I had to meet you here.
Number 9. The Manhattans, Kiss and Say Goodbye. There's a version of Kiss and Say Goodbye playing somewhere right now on a classic soul station, and most people singing along have no idea the man behind that voice joined the group because someone else didn't survive to see it.
It's what we've done. Oh, was a wrong.
The Manhattans formed in the early 60s around a rich, gospel-soaked baritone named George "Smitty" Smith. He was the sound people associated with the group in its formative years, the voice on their early singles, the one who helped build their reputation on the Chitlin circuit.
Been meeting here so long.
In 1970, Smith died. The group had a choice most young acts never recover from: fold quietly or find a way forward while carrying the loss with them. They chose forward. A young singer named Gerald Alston stepped into the role, and the Manhattans spent the next several years rebuilding an identity around a voice the world hadn't heard yet.
Passed us
By 1976, Kiss and Say Goodbye became a #1 pop and R&B smash, the biggest hit the group would ever have, built entirely on a voice that didn't exist in the Manhattan sound 6 years earlier. In 1980, Shining Star extended that legacy even further, becoming a signature record for a group that, by any reasonable expectation, should have ended with its founder. Gerald Alston spent years being introduced to audiences as the replacement, a shadow standing where a legend used to stand. Few remember that the Manhattans' most successful commercial era only happened because a young singer was willing to carry a group through the kind of grief most bands never recover from.
Understand me, won't you try?
Grief built one legacy. Coming up, ambition tore apart another, and Motown almost lost everything because of it.
Now it's up to
Number 8. The Spinners. I'll Be Around. Detroit, early 70s. A group called the Spinners has spent nearly a decade recording for Motown, watching other acts get the promotion, the budget, the attention, while they got leftovers. Their lead singer, G.C. Cameron, was talented enough to eventually get pulled toward a solo deal with the label. In 1972, he left.
I'll be around.
Most groups in that position quietly disappeared into Motown's back catalog. Instead, something unusual happened. Aretha Franklin, yes, that Aretha Franklin, personally recommended the group to Atlantic Records. They signed, and their new lead singer, a gravel-voiced dynamo named Philippe Wynne, walked into the studio and helped build an entirely new sound for the group. One soaked in orchestral soul instead of Motown's assembly line pop.
Call me, I'll be there whenever.
I'll Be Around dropped later that same year, 1972, the same year Cameron left, and became the group's first major hit under their new configuration. It was followed almost immediately by Could It Be I'm Falling in Love, then 2 years later by Then Came You, a chart-topping duet with Dionne Warwick that became the Spinners' only #1 pop hit in their entire career.
I'll be there. I'll be around.
The Spinners spent nearly 10 years being overlooked at Motown, specifically because Berry Gordy's attention was locked onto other acts. The lead singer who eventually left, G.C. Cameron, didn't fail the group. The label failed him first, and the group only found its true voice once it escaped the very machine that made it invisible. Some groups needed a new label to be heard. The next one needed a family fracture that played out in the tabloids. Number 7. The Jacksons. Shake Your Body. Down to the Ground. There's a photograph from 1976 that tells you everything about what was about to happen. 5 brothers, 1 contract dispute, and a decision that would split a family act down the middle. The Jackson 5 wanted out of Motown. Berry Gordy said no. So 4 of the 5 brothers walked, taking their sound to Epic Records and renaming themselves the Jacksons. Jermaine Jackson didn't go with them. He was married to Berry Gordy's daughter, and he chose to stay loyal to Motown, to his father-in-law, to the label that discovered them. His brothers replaced him with the youngest Jackson sibling, Randy, and moved forward without the voice that had shared lead vocals on some of their earliest, biggest records. What followed wasn't decline, it was reinvention. Enjoy Yourself became a hit in 1976. Then, in 1978, Shake Your Body, Down to the Ground, exploded. Co-written by Michael and Randy Jackson, and to this day, one of the most sampled, most iconic disco-funk records of its era. It became the Jacksons' signature song, bigger than nearly anything the Jackson 5 had released under Motown, all built without the brother who had once stood shoulder to shoulder with Michael on lead vocals. Jermaine Jackson's loyalty to Motown effectively cost him his place in the group's biggest commercial era. He watched his brothers become bigger stars than ever without him, while his own Motown output during that same period struggled to find an audience. A quiet, decades-long wound that reportedly never fully healed between the brothers. Family loyalty broke one group open. Coming up, a group loses its very first voice, and somehow becomes an entire genre's blueprint for the 80s. Number 6. Shalamar, A Night to Remember. Los Angeles, 1977. A new group forms out of the Soul Train dance floor, built on the choreography-driven energy of the disco era. Their first lead singer, Gerald Brown, gave Shalamar its earliest sound, smooth, disco-leaning, forgettable in hindsight compared to what came next. Brown left the group in 1978, and Shalamar brought in a session singer named Howard Hewitt. What happened next reshaped the sound of an entire decade. Paired with Jody Watley and Jeffrey Daniel, Hewitt's voice gave Shalamar something Gerald Brown's era never had: a bridge between disco's fading energy and the emerging sound of 80s boogie and funk. The second time around became a massive hit in 1979, a full year after Brown's exit. Then, in 1982, A Night to Remember became arguably the defining Shalamar record, a song still sampled and referenced by producers decades later, built entirely around a voice that wasn't even in the group when it first formed. Gerald Brown's departure is barely a footnote in most retellings of Shalamar's story, a group so thoroughly reshaped by Hewitt's arrival that its own original lead singer became historically invisible, erased not through malice, but through the sheer scale of what came after him. Some voices get erased by history. The next one got fired, and helped invent a sound Motown didn't even know it needed. Number 5. The Temptations. Papa was a Rollin' Stone. By 1968, David Ruffin was the Temptations. His voice on My Girl, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, and I Wish It Would Rain had made him one of the most recognizable lead vocalists in American music. He also knew it, showing up late to rehearsals, demanding equal billing, and eventually pushing the group to a breaking point. In June of 1968, the Temptations fired him.
Talking about saving souls and all the time leeching.
Dennis Edwards, previously of the Contours, stepped in. And almost immediately, producer Norman Whitfield began pulling the group in a completely different direction, away from the polished pop soul of the Ruffin era and into something darker, funkier, more politically and emotionally charged. Cloud 9 dropped later that same year, won the group's first Grammy, and signaled a total reinvention.
Papa called himself a jack of all trades. Tell me, is that
I Can't Get Next to You followed in 1969. Then, in 1972, Papa Was a Rollin' Stone arrived, an 11-minute psychedelic soul epic about an absent, unfaithful father, built on a bass line and orchestral arrangement that had almost nothing in common with anything the Ruffin-era Temptations ever recorded. It won 3 Grammy Awards and remains one of the most sampled, most studied recordings in soul music history. David Ruffin spent the rest of his life watching the group he helped define achieve its most critically acclaimed era without him, while his own solo career and personal struggles spiraled. He died in 1991 after years of addiction, having outlived neither the resentment nor the shadow of a decision he never fully accepted. Firing a legend rebuilt one group's legacy. Coming up, a departure so quiet it barely made headlines, until the songs that followed made history. Number 4. The Supremes, Stoned Love, January 1970. Diana Ross performs her final show with the Supremes at the Frontier Hotel in Las Vegas, and Motown introduces her replacement, Jean Terrell, on the very same stage. It was engineered to look seamless. Behind the scenes, it was anything but. A calculated, carefully managed transition designed to protect a label built on Ross's stardom. What almost nobody predicted was what happened next. Terrell's voice was different, deeper, more textured, less polished than Ross's. Rather than trying to replicate what Ross had built, the new lineup leaned into that difference. Later in 1970, Stoned Love was released, and it became one of the best-selling singles the Supremes ever put out, bigger, by some measures, than several late-era Ross-fronted hits. It reached number 1 on the R&B chart and became a defining record of the group's post-Ross era, proof that the Supremes' commercial power had never belonged to one voice alone. Motown spent years quietly minimizing the Jean Terrell era in the group's official narrative, favoring the mythology of Diana Ross as the singular voice of the Supremes. Terrell's contributions, including a genuine number 1 hit, were treated by the label's own promotional machine as a footnote to a story Motown had already decided belonged to someone else. That kind of erasure would happen again. Coming up, a teenage group implodes in public and comes back as the biggest-selling girl group in music history. Number 3. New Edition, If It Isn't Love. By 1985, New Edition was a teenage phenomenon unraveling in real time. Bobby Brown, the group's most charismatic member, was increasingly at odds with management over money, creative control, and discipline. The group fired him that year, sending him into a solo career nobody could have predicted would eventually make him one of the biggest R&B stars of the decade.
Told her to never fall in love. Now she know better.
New Edition didn't just survive Brown's exit, they used it. Ralph Tresvant stepped fully into the lead role, and by 1987 the group had added a new member, Johnny Gill, whose powerhouse vocals gave the group a dimension it never had with Brown fronting it. The 1988 album Heartbreak became their most sonically ambitious project, built on the kind of layered, mature R&B production that a younger New Edition simply couldn't have pulled off.
Don't love her. I tried to tell myself.
If It Isn't Love and Can You Stand the Rain both became massive hits that year, showcasing a vocal blend, Tresvant's smoothness against Gill's raw power, that many fans consider the true creative peak of New Edition's entire catalog. Bobby Brown's solo success became so enormous, so fast, that it created a public narrative suggesting New Edition had lost their star. In reality, The group's most vocally accomplished album came after he left, a fact largely buried under the noise of Brown's own rising fame and the industry's preference for a simpler story. One group turned a firing into their finest work. Coming up, a group loses 2 members in a lawsuit-fueled scandal and becomes a genre-defining trio almost by accident. Number 2. The O'Jays, Love Train. The O'Jays started as a 5-man group in the late 50s, grinding through more than a decade of regional success without ever breaking into the mainstream. By the early 70s, the lineup had thinned to a trio: Eddie Levert, Walter Williams, and William Powell, after other founding members stepped away from performing to focus on the business side of the group. What could have read as a group in decline instead became a rebirth. Freed from a larger lineup and paired with producers Gamble and Huff at the newly formed Philadelphia International Records, the trio recorded Backstabbers in 1972, a song about betrayal and mistrust that became an instant classic. That same year, Love Train reached #1 on the pop charts, becoming the O'Jays' first and only chart-topping pop hit, and one of the definitive anthems of the Philly soul sound. The group that had spent over a decade unable to break through suddenly became one of the most important acts of the entire Philadelphia soul movement, built on a leaner lineup than the one that started it all. The members who stepped back from the spotlight to manage the group's business affairs rarely receive credit in the mainstream retelling of the O'Jays' success. Their decision to work behind the scenes helped stabilize a group that had struggled for over a decade, yet history remembers only the 3 voices that stood in front of the microphone when the hits finally came. And now, the story that changed everything. A group that nearly ended in a courtroom and came back as the best-selling girl group of all time. Number 1. Destiny's Child, Survivor. In early 2000, Destiny's Child was falling apart in public. LaToya Luckett and Latavia Roberson, 2 of the group's original members, filed a lawsuit against management, alleging mistreatment and unfair compensation. The fallout was messy, personal, and impossible to hide from fans who watched a beloved girl group implode in real time on entertainment news. By the time the dust settled, Destiny's Child had reformed as a trio: Beyonce Knowles, Kelly Rowland, and Michelle Williams, after a brief and complicated period involving a 4th member. Many assumed the controversy had permanently damaged the group's future. Instead, what followed became one of the most successful runs in R&B history. Say My Name became a massive hit as the transition played out. Then, in 2001, Survivor arrived, a song widely interpreted as Beyoncé's direct response to the lawsuit and public criticism, turning the group's most painful chapter into their most defining anthem. Bootylicious followed that same year, cementing the trio not just as survivors of scandal, but as one of the most commercially dominant girl groups in music history, eventually earning them the title of the best-selling girl group of all time. LaToya Luckett and Latavia Roberson watched from the outside as the group they helped build achieved its greatest commercial success without them, a success partly built on lyrics widely believed to be about the very conflict that pushed them out. Both women would go on to build their own careers, but neither ever returned to the group whose biggest triumph was, in some interpretation, A song about leaving them behind. 10 groups, 10 voices that walked away, were pushed out, or never got the chance to stay. And somehow, the songs that outlived them became the ones we can't stop singing. Maybe that's the truth nobody wants to admit, that the spotlight doesn't belong to any one voice. It gets passed like a letter mailed to a future version of a group, arriving long after the person who wrote it has already gone. If one of these stories hit you differently, tell us which one in the comments. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Because we are not done uncovering the voices the industry tried to forget. The music never lies, even when the industry does.